Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is how to factor trinomials when a, the very first number, is greater than a 1. So if you recall, when we have done our factoring before, like what we were doing up here in our warm-up, we just saw this was a 1x squared, so x and x would go there. There's no other options. And then what did we multiply together to get 45, and those same numbers added together would give us 14. So we picked a 9 and a 5. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 plus 5 is 14. So that's how that worked. And then here again the same thing. N squared. It was 1n squared. So the n and the n had to go there. And then what did I multiply together to get negative 28? Negative 7 times positive 4. Because negative 7 times positive 4 gives me a negative 28. And then negative 7 plus 4 gives me the negative 3 I need in the middle. So that's my factoring there. And then we did the same thing on number 3, but on number 3 we had a greatest common factor that we could take out. So we divided each one by 2, and we ended up with a squared plus a minus 12. And again, an a and an a goes there. That's easy. It's the only option. So what are we looking at? How do we get negative 12? Positive 4 times negative 3. Positive 4 times negative 3 multiplied together gives me negative 12. But when I add negative 3 to 4, it gives me a positive 1. Again, we'll look at this last one here. So divide this out. 4 goes into all of those, and that gives me p squared when I do the division. P squared minus 6p plus 5. So then I factor from there, and this is a good warm-up because we're going to do the same thing. That's kind of sloppy factoring there. Okay, only option here, a p and a p. That gives me my p squared when I multiply it back out. Now, product of 5. So what can I multiply together to get a 5? But those same numbers, when added together, will give me a sum of negative 6. So here when I'm thinking about this, I want to remember that positive 5 can be, I can get that by multiplying positive 1 times positive 5. That's going to give me a 5. But also negative 1 times negative 5. That will also give me a positive 5. And I'm thinking about that because I need a negative 6. So anytime I see the middle term has a negative in it, but the last term doesn't, I want to think they both have to be negative. That's how I'd get a positive here and a negative there. So negative 1 plus negative 5, add those together and they equal negative 6. So there it is. Negative 1, negative 5. And that 4 goes on the outside. So that's that factored. So we're pretty much going to do something very similar to this part of it. The only change is going to be what do we do with this a when we don't have a greatest common factor to take out. So what we're going to do is called the slip and slide method, which means when a, first number, cannot be factored out by the greatest common factor, we can maybe still factor the trinomial. The steps below will show a method called the slip and slide method to factor the trinomials. So what do? We take a, this first term, and we slip it over to c. So there's our a, and we slip it a to the end of the trinomial and multiply it by c. Then we have a trinomial that will look like one of those above after we got the greatest common factor out. A will be 1. We factor that trinomial. Then we divide both of those factors by the value we slipped over in step 1. That is where we're going to do a slide. We reduce the fractions and slide any denominator up to the next variable, and we distribute to check. So what is that going to look like? Let's look at example 1. So the first thing I do, slip the 2 over to the 3. So slip 2 over to 3. And then I multiply. 2 times 3. 6. Okay, so that is, you're going to see where that's going to go. Now I have x squared plus 5x plus, and now this 6 is replacing my 3. Now I factor that. So what am I going to put here and here to get x squared? X and x. See how simple it is? Because now it's just a 1 there. So now product needs to be 6, and my sum, the number in the middle, needs to be 5, both positive. And if I see that they're positive here, I know it's going to be a positive and a positive there. So now what times what gives me 1? I could think, 6. I could think of 1 times 6, but 1 plus 6 does not equal 5. I could also think of 2 times 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5. There it is. So I just look at those numbers, and that's what goes here, and I'm done. I have factored. Now I multiply it out to double check, but we're just going to talk about it. X times x gives me x squared. Then I look at the 6, the 2, and the 3, that gives me 5. 2 times 3 gives me 6. So I add those two, I get 5. I multiply them, I get 6. And I know I've got it right. And that's how we do the slip and slide method. The next video will have an example of how you do number 2.